What's up, YouTube? Capital G here. Going to talk about Billy Break's YCS third place in Sector, or maybe I should say in SafeZektor deck that he took to YCS Chicago. This was originally posted on Serious Shoeborn Frog's channel, so I obviously give him some credit because he's the one who did the original video. This is probably one of the best examples of a deck that's very conventional, but there's some very key tech that looks like, obviously when Billy Break plays tech, it's going to catch on because he's that caliber of player. Like, this is almost, I almost want to put like an annotation like, don't try this at home, because he is the definition of skillful player and pro, you know what I mean? And generally when he sheds light on a card, it starts seeing a lot of play. 3 copies of Insector Dragonfly, 3 copies of Insector Centipede, and 3 copies of Insector Hornet, the 9 basic Insectors. 2 copies of Insector Hopper, 1 copy of Insector Giga Mantis. We've got 3 copies of Tour Guide from the Underworld, 3 copies of Effect Veiler, 1 copy of Sangan to go with the Tour Guides, 1 copy of Blackluster Soldier, 3 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, 2 copies of Zexcalibur, 1 copy of Dark Hole, 1 copy of Monster Reborn, 1 copy of Foolish Burial, 1 copy of Book of Moon, 1 copy of Heavy Storm, 3 copies of Safe Zone, 2 copies of Call of the Haunted, 2 copies of Torrential Tribute, and we have the Solemn Brigade, which is 2 copies of Solemn Warning and a Solemn Judgment. The biggest thing that stuck out immediately are the safe zones. Why are these pretty good in this deck? Okay, well, first off, a lot of people have been going to Forbidden Lance, because basically, if you can get your Dragonfly onto the field, or you can get your Centipede onto the field without it dying, to a Gemini Spark or a Torrential, you're pretty much safe. And Forbidden Lance covers some ground, because then your opponent can't chain other things, or they can't use other cards like a Mirror Force or something like that later in the turn, although they're likely to get blown up anyway. What's good about Safe Zone is Safe Zone covers battle. Safe Zone covers your next turn. Let's say your opponent uses non-targeting destruction, things like Torrential Tribute, Bottomless Trap Hole on your Centipede, cards like that, or for some reason like a Mirror Force. You can chain Safe Zone. Your monster's not going to die, and you still have your Insector that's not only going to be able to sit there, resolve its effect, blow up cards, but on your next turn, your opponent can't kill it via battle either. And this card covers a little more ground that Forbidden Lance doesn't cover, because okay, let's say that your opponent does something like they chain Gemini Spark to target your back row Safe Zone. Okay, well now you can chain Safe Zone, target one of their other monsters, and their other monster will die. Like if your opponent blind MSTs this, you can just activate it, chain it to one of their monsters, and when Safe Zone dies, their monster dies too. So you end up going 2 for 1. Again, it's good against stuff like Dark Hole, Smashing Ground, non-targeting destruction that your opponent will use on their turn. So again, it has that Forbidden Lance angle. And if your opponent has, just for some reason like just summons a monster, wants to attack over your Dragonfly, well, you can chain Safe Zone onto your Dragonfly. It won't die in battle, and then at the very least, your opponent has committed to the field. So now your Centipede, your Dragonfly, your Hopper, whatever you have on the field, it can start popping cards off with Hornet. I'm starting to see that that Call of the Haunted is definitely starting to be really good in this deck, because you think about it like this. Again, Insectors are offensively the most potent deck in the entire format. That's kind of unquestioned. They kind of remind me like a slower version of Infernity when Infernity had 3 launchers. Like if Infernity went off, it was over. You just were gonna lose. This deck basically wants to be able to, if you summon the Dragonfly or the Centipede and your opponent has a way to stop that, you want to answer your opponent's ways to stop that. Multiple ways of answering this are, again, using cards like Safe Zone or Forbidden Lance to say, hey, you tried to Torrential me, but guess what? My monster's still here and it's still living. The second way is simply to, if your monster dies, to bring that monster back with cards like Monster Reborn, but that's limited. So you can use something a little more consistent like Call of the Haunted. If your opponent warnings your Dragonfly, well, are they going to have that second warning or that second Torrential Tribute when you Call of the Haunted and go nuts on their field? Because they were probably only expecting you to, have that normal summon available. One card that I love in his side deck, and I played against this when I was still playing Heroes earlier last week, like last Monday. I played against a player on DN, and he was using Messenger Apiece, and I found this card to be an absolute pain in the ass, because here's the thing. Most decks right now are only playing, if you're not playing a mirror match with Insector, you're only playing a Heavy Storm 3 MSTs, and that's like that would be like Rabbit. If you're playing against heroes, that they have significantly less, because they don't really play MSTs in the main deck. They just have like Gemini Sparks. Here's what this card does. It does with like Level Limit and Gravity Bind don't do. This covers Xyz. You know what I mean? So if your opponent has that rabbit on the field, they don't dodge it like they would against Level Limit, or they don't dodge it like they would against Gravity Bind, where they can still attack. This card basically ensures your opponent will have to waste at least some type of removal on destroying this. And the thing about Insectors is they can just sit there. They can say, okay, we're just going to stack our field up, because eventually you're going to run out of answers for us. If you have a Doka and I've got this Messenger Apiece, I can get your Doka to, give up its negates. I can hit it with something, then Call of the Haunted one of my monsters back, and eventually I'm probably going to win this stall game that we're playing. So Billy said that this card is going to be the downfall of Rabbit once people realize it. And again, if he runs it, a lot of people are going to be, looking at the card at the very least. So another card that probably might see a lot of play now, Trap Stun with Insectors. Again, with Insectors, you're just looking for multiple ways to go off, because there really isn't another deck in the format that can, handle the offensive potency that Insectors bring to the table. Just because when you start Dragonflying, blowing up cards, when you add in things like Zexcalibur, they now have OTK power. Even if you banish their monsters, they have Leviair plays to get their monsters back. With Ladybug, the deck is going to be able to exceed in the rank 5s. It's just an offensive nightmare. So let me know what you guys think. I think that his deck was really well built. Congratulations to Billy Break, and thank you guys for watching as always.